Well, it's been a while since we've done this. Almost 2 full years, and, well, a lot has changed since then. I mean, I've since visited Epic Universe, I've gotten back to the other two Universal Orlando parks, as well as ventured over to several parks near and in Los Angeles, California. So, with the next year and a half ahead of me looking insanely packed with new attractions. Hey, video, stop spoiling shit! Okay, whatever. Let's just roll the intro. Okay, before we start, I want to explain that this list was determined based on my own personal opinions and views. You do not have to agree with my ranking, nor is this a list based on ride's objective level. It is more so ranked on what coasters I would want to ride more at any given time, and just my general enjoyment of each ride. Now with that all out of the way, let's take a look at 5 coasters that just barely missed my top 25. Alright, to start off this list, we have to travel to the sweetest town on earth in Hershey Park to take a ride on their intimate vertical lift coaster, Fahrenheit. Now, unlike every other ride on this list, I was only able to get a single ride on this beast, but that just goes to show how much I loved it. My one ride was in the back row, and it was one of the most fun and whippy coaster experiences I have had in a while. The first 97-degree drop is one of my favorites I have done. But not only that, the following layout featuring 6 inversions is just pure fun, providing several moments of strong positive Gs, as well as a few moments of fun ejector airtime. All around, I'm sad I didn't get more rides on this incredible coaster, but despite that, it still secured a spot in my top 25. For our next coaster, we need to travel to the Sunshine State and into Marvel's Superhero Island for debatably the most intense roller coaster in Florida, the Incredible Hulk. This is a launched B&M sit-down coaster with 7 intense inversions, including the second most insane Cobra roll that I have ever experienced, only behind Alpengeist. The highlight of the attraction is easily the upwards tire launch right at the beginning of the ride. Due to the steep uphill angle, you are slammed into the back of your seat with way more force than you would ever expect. And in all honesty, this is probably the most intense launch in the park. And hell, I'd go as far to say the whole of Florida. The reason this isn't higher is because the second half loses a lot of speed, but I can't deny the insanity of that first half. Flying all the way across the country to Northern California with Six Flags Magic Mountain and the only flying coaster on my list, it's Tatsu. While this is in no way the actual biggest coaster on this list, not by a long shot, when you are riding this coaster, you feel on top of the world. This was one of my most anticipated coasters at Magic Mountain, and based on its ranking this high in my list, it's clear that it blew me away. While the ride as a whole isn't the most intense that I've ridden, it has far and away one of the most insane coaster elements I have ever experienced, the pretzel loop. Now, when I say that I was completely flabbergasted after my first ride, I meant it. That single element propelled it into my top 25, and the only reason it isn't higher is because the coaster is over extremely quickly after that pretzel loop. But for what it has, it deserves my number 23 spot. For the number 22 spot, we have to go down to Texas and San Antonio for their GCI wooden coaster, Texas Stingray. I believe wholeheartedly that this is the most underrated GCI roller coaster in the United States, since it's at a park that doesn't get all too much attention. The ride is split into two separate halves: the large sweeping turns at the start, and the much more rapid hops and twists of the second half. Both sections offer great pops of ejector airtime and intense lateral forces, but the means in which you get them is different in both. This is also one of the few GCI coasters to feature a straight drop, rather than a curved one most of their rides feature. All in all, this ride needs to be talked about more and is easily the best coaster in SeaWorld San Antonio. Let's go back down to Florida and to another SeaWorld owned property for the B&M Hyper Mako. Well, this is my favorite of the B&M Hypers that I have been on. I cannot deny that the first half is absolutely outstanding, with his 200-foot drop, floaty overbank turn, and most notably, the incredible 5-second floater hill, which by all accounts lives up to its name, providing, well, 5 seconds of sustained floater airtime for everyone in the train. Along with the 5-second floater hill, there's another really good camelback, as well as an excellent speed hill before the mid-course brake run. Despite how amazing that first half is, what keeps it from it being any higher is the lack of forces in the second half. If it had a stronger finale, then I would easily put it higher than it is right now. But for now, it slots in at the number 21 spot on my list. For the next ride, we have to go to the Roller Coaster Coast with Cedar Point for the first ever hypercoaster, Magnum XL 200. Unlike Mako, Magnum is by no sense of the word a smooth ride. And honestly, that's what makes me love it so much. All of the transitions are super awkward and janky, but I never found it uncomfortable during any of my rides. In fact, it more so made me laugh hysterically instead. While the first half of the ride is good and just pure fun, it is the second half that secures its position on this list. The return trip back to the station is a series of ridiculously intense triangle airtime hills, which send you skyward in the most absurdly fun way. I love Magnum, and I can't wait to get back on it whenever I make my way back out to the park in the future. Let's travel down to my home park for this next coaster and take a look at Copperhead Strike, which fills up my number 19 spot. This is a coaster that I believe needs to be talked about way more than it is now. This is a mock multi launch coaster that opened in 2019 and is the Carolina's only launch coaster, which is funny for a ride that has less force in its launches than rolling down a hill in a shopping cart. But that's like the only bad thing I have to say about this ride. The layout outside of those launches is so good and just genuinely fun, featuring 5 floating inversions and several moments of floater and ejector airtime. The standout aspect of Copperhead is the oodles of sustained hang time, mainly in the JoJo roll, first vertical loop, and elongated cutback. Along with this mixture of other forces, this easily secures a spot on my list. Traveling back to Hershey, Pennsylvania for the first of many times in this video, we have the hydraulic launch coaster Storm Runner. While Copperhead Strike has a long layout with weak launches, Storm Runner is the complete opposite of that, with one insanely forceful launch and a rather short but intense layout to follow, featuring 3 inversions, including the absolutely mental flying snake dive, which pulls forces that I never had and still haven't felt anything similar to since. There are also a few good moments of airtime, but it is mainly all about the speed and whip of the elements. I don't really have all that much to say about Storm Runner because, well, the layout is only 4 elements long, not counting the launch at the start, and it is due to this short ride time and the lack of elements that it only makes it to my number 18 spot on this list. Jumping down to the state with almost more moonshine than trees, it's Tennessee and the one and only Dollywood for their incredible GCI twister coaster, Thunderhead. This was easily the best ride in the park just due to the relentless pacing, frankly, mental airtime in the insane laterals. There's not a single moment during this layout where the coaster takes its foot off the gas and lets you breathe. From the very moment you disengage the lift chain, it is just rapid ejector airtime pops and extremely strong moments of sustained laterals all the way until you slam into the final brakes. Basically, everything I said about Texas Stingray earlier can be moved to this ride, but cranked up to 11 because those forces are turned up substantially. There was one moment in particular right here that flung me so hard when I was in the front row that I was legitimately standing in my seat, pinned against my restraint. It's because of this and so much more that I didn't mention that Thunderhead takes my number 17 spot in the place of my second favorite wooden coaster ever. Guess where we're going? We're going back to Hershey Park for their Intamin Wing Hypercoaster, Sky Rush. Can you tell that Hershey has one of the greatest coaster lineups in the country? Despite that off point, Skyrush is commonly one of the most divisive coasters when it comes to general discourse in the theme park world. But I was very happy to find that I absolutely loved the ride. From the second that I was yanked down that first drop, I was completely hooked. Every single airtime hill tries to throw you across the park with such force that it almost hurts when you are slammed up against the restraint time and time again. The first drop has one of the most ridiculous bursts of ejector airtime on any coaster I've felt. Then the following airtime hills have equally powerful, but even more sustained moments of ejector airtime, as well as bonkers laterals and positives on the low to the ground turns between the hills. The only moment that really didn't keep up the same intensity was a low turn between the Stangle Dive and Switchback Hill. But outside of that one slower section, Skyrush is beyond insane. However, it's not enough to break into my top 15. Starting off the top 15, we need to travel down to Atlanta for Six Flags Over Georgia and the B&M Hyper Goliath. This is far and away my favorite B&M Hyper in the world, just due to the strength and consistency of the airtime. And unlike other hypers I've ridden, the trims don't kill the pacing of this one at all. The far turnaround is one of the best I've seen on any coaster. It is such a long and sustained downwards 540-degree helix, which pulls so much force that I remember graying out on almost every single ride. One thing many people complain about with Goliath is the fact that it has developed a bit of a rattle. However, in my opinion, it doesn't take away from the ride in the slightest. Rather, I found it added an extra bit of bite, which increased the sense of intensity. The only reason it's my third favorite B&M is the fact that, by all accounts, the ride is pretty short, only having a single out and back section, and you hit the final brake run around the same time other hypers hit their mid course. Despite all that, it still grabs the 15th spot on my list. For the second and final time, let's move to Sandusky, Ohio, and Cedar Point for their Intamin Blitz coaster, Maverick. This is far and away my favorite coaster at Cedar Point, just due to the blitz of forces it provides, from the beyond vertical 95-degree drop, which completely yanks you from your seat when in the back car. Following this is a series of extremely whippy snaps, which provides you not only crazy laterals, but also intense bursts of ejector airtime, as you are pulled from left to right. Tie all of this with the breakneck pacing and even more incredible second launch, and it is just a near perfect coaster in all fronts. The only reason it isn't higher is because there's a coaster later on this list that does everything Maverick does, but even better. For the first RMC of the list, we have to go to King's Dominion for their 2018 hybrid coaster, Twisted Timbers. I have and will continue to say that this is the superior of the two RMC hybrids to open at the Cedar Fair Parks in 2018. However, I don't think it's a perfect coaster. The first half up to the Outer Bank turnaround under the lift is an absolute masterpiece. In particular, the triple camelbacks leading up to the cutback. This series of elements provides some of the best sustained ejector airtime that I have ever experienced. sending me out of my seat for at least 5 or 6 seconds on each hill. My only problem spawns right after the final inversion, because I'm not a huge fan of how jerky the final few elements are. The two stangle turns and the tiny airtime pop before the brakes aren't the most comfortable, but the layout before that makes up for it. From one RMC to another, we have to go back to Texas, but this time to Six Flags Fiesta Texas for Iron Rattler. Iron Rattler was the first RMC to feature an inversion, the Heaven Roll. Golly, that is still one of the best inversions the company has done to this day. When it comes to general RMC layouts, Iron Rattler actually has a really unique one due to its heavy interaction with the park's quarry wall. Throughout the layout, you are constantly flying up on top of, off the side of, and even through it, which makes the ride feel incredibly dynamic and unique in terms of RMCs. The last thing I have to mention is that absolutely insane first drop, which very possibly could be the best first drop I've ever experienced. Despite all of this, the ride has one glaring flaw: the length. And it's because of this super short ride duration that it isn't able to break into my top 10. Popping back up to Virginia to Busch Gardens Williamsburg for their intimate multi launch Pantheon. This is the only of the modern intimate launch coasters I've experienced, which features their high speed switch track system. And this was also the first coaster with a proper backwards launch that I've been on. Suffice to say that it blew me away in all regards. While the layout itself isn't long by any definition of the word, the inclusion of that swing launch and backward spike rounded out the layout so nicely. In terms of forces, the backwards airtime hill is just as insane as you would think. But also, the top hat has some wonderful whip in the back rows, which is just the same as the outer bank turn. Finally, the zero G stall is just a perfect moment of upside down float for several seconds, along with a gnarly head chopper exiting the element. All around, when it comes to roller coasters, this is a fantastic coaster that just barely missed the top 10. We've now reached my top 10 coasters. Before we hop into this, I would like to ask you to hit that like button if you've enjoyed the video thus far. And if you want to see more from me in the future, then please subscribe and hit that notification bell so you're notified when I release a new video in the future. I have a lot planned that you aren't going to want to miss. Okay, back to the video. Kicking off the top 10, we have to travel back to Florida once again for a coaster I didn't expect to love this much: Pipeline the Surf Coaster. This is, like the name implies, a B&M surf coaster, and the first of its kind in this new generation of B&M stand-ups. The main difference between the surf coaster and the old stand-up model, which propelled it this high in my list, is that the seats are able to freely move both up and down a certain amount, which makes the airtime you get on Pipeline so much crazier. You will go over a hill and get flung off the train as your feet fly up in front of you, giving the truest form of standing airtime you can get. It's a fascinating feeling and one that I couldn't get enough of while at the park. It's a fantastic coaster that just barely snuck into my top 10 overall coasters. Staying in the same state, we need to travel just a few minutes down the road and back to the Universal Orlando Resort for Stardust Racers, which technically takes up my number 8 and 9 spots. So, I guess I need to change up the text layout. Shit. These sections are going to be very short because, well, whatever I say about my number 9 spot, Photon, will be basically the exact same for the other side, Pulsar. The only element I feel really makes a huge difference between the two tracks is the order of the celestial spin. And the reason why I like green side slightly more, because you roll upwards the element and then have a straight drop with tons of ejector airtime. Compare this to yellow side that has half of a floater hill first, then you have a downwards roll as the second half of the element. Outside of that, I can't really say much more about these because they blew me out of the water no matter what. Going from one side of the country to the clear opposite side, we are back in California to take a look at my all-time favorite wooden coaster, Ghost Rider. When I say that this is an absolute masterpiece of pacing and making a ride only get better the deeper into the layout it gets. The first half is large and sprawling while still providing strong moments of sustained airtime and laterals. But after the mid-course, this shifts to be far more rapid and aggressive. Airtime moments get more abrupt and sudden, and the laterals seem to sneak up on you as you careen through the dense wooden support structure. All of this coming to a head with the insanely powerful, unbanked helix, which keeps you pinned to the side of the train with so much force that it almost hurt. This was the coaster I rode the most during my trip to California, and I can't wait to ride it again at some point in the future. Hopping back to Virginia one last time, we have to go to King's Dominion for Pantherian. This coaster is just absurd. I mean, totally ridiculously absurd. Remember how I mentioned that Maverick has some really whippy lateral snaps? Yeah, we'll take Maverick snaps, but make the train go through them at about 80 miles per hour. Getting into specifics, Pantherian is an Intamin gigacoaster, which, without question, is one of, if not the most intense roller coaster in the entire world. Pulling over 5 Gs of force in the first low to the ground turn, on top of the lateral ejector airtime in the directional snaps about halfway through the layout. The last time I got on this beast, I did an 8-ride marathon right at the end of the day, and I ended up blacking out each and every single ride. But by God, it was worth it to get so many rides on this monster coaster. It's for these reasons that Pantherian slides into my number 6 spot. However, it can't quite crack into my top 5. Shockingly, we are going back to Florida. Jesus Christ. For the only RMC in the state, Iron Gwazi. What was once my number 1 coaster after my first ride, and maintained that spot for over a year, is now sitting comfortably in my number 5 position. When it comes to pure pacing, nothing quite beats Iron Gwazi in terms of other RMC coasters. From start to finish, it is pure pedal to the metal action, featuring 2 inversions and loads of pure ejector airtime. The best moment of the ride is easily the ejector reverse wave turn that just completely flings you out of your seat, and one of the most insane moments of airtime I've ever felt. It is only further enhanced by how quickly you whip into and out of the element. A couple other standout moments have to be the 91-degree first drop, the super steep outward bank turn, the death roll, and lastly, the overbank turn right before the wave turn. I really have no complaints for this coaster, nor any of the rides ahead of it, but I can't wait to get back on this 10 out of 10 coaster in the future. For the last time in this video, we're going back to Hershey, Pennsylvania, and for the last RMC on this list, Wildcats Revenge. This was my number 1 coaster in the last top 25 list I made, and much like Iron Gwazi, it has since gone down from my number 1 spot in the time following that video. Even still, this is one of the most aggressive coasters I've ever ridden. Every single hill throws you into lap bar like you owe the ride money. And this is most true with the second wave turn, an unbanked twisted double down, which features one of the most insane lateral jolts I've ever felt. Wildcat is the only other RMC I've been on with pacing remotely similar to Iron Gwazi, where at no point it feels like it takes its foot off the gas until you slam to a stop in the final brakes. While Wildcat might not be as big as Gwazi, it does everything I loved on Gwazi and more. Thus, it still maintains a spot 1 slot ahead of it in my rankings. Now, before we get into the top 3, let's take a quick look at a few very notable coasters that didn't quite make my list nor honorable mentions, and where they are currently placed in my rankings. With those now out of the way, let's take a look at the final 3 coasters on my list. To kick off the top 3, we need to travel to my home park of Carowinds, and the coaster that has been in my top 3 for the longest time, Fury 325. What a coaster! By all accounts, Fury 325 is one of the greatest roller coasters ever designed. Even just from watching the coaster off ride as it tears over and around the main entrance with such high speed. And the coolest part is you're basically able to walk directly under the majority of the coaster. In terms of the actual ride experience, it's just incredible. From the moment you drop down that first drop, which lasts forever, Fury refuses to take its foot off the gas, throwing you through intense turns, rapid transitions, and lots of airtime. It is a super long ride with no major dead spots, while still being extremely comfortable throughout. I will always have a massive soft spot for Fury, and I don't think it will leave my top 3 anytime soon.
Experience the extreme. Only at Six Flags Magic Mountain. Now, the extreme park.
Going back to California, we need to take a look at the most demented roller coaster in the country, X2 at Six Flags Magic Mountain. Excuse my language, but what the actual shit is this coaster? This is far and away the most insane roller coaster on my list, as well as the roughest by an even larger margin. The mixture of the brutally intense layout and the jerky vertical rotation combine to make a wildly disorienting and one of the most polarizing rides in the world. Personally, based on how high I have it ranked, it is very clear that I ended up falling in love with this coaster. This was easily my most anticipated coaster in California. So I was in a state of euphoria for the entire ride. From the moment that you are yanked down that nearly 90-degree drop and forced to stare at the ground as it rapidly gets closer to you, only to curl out at the last second, all the way until you whip into the final brake run. The most insane element on the ride is far and away that final Raven turn, which feels like a freaking car crash in the best way. I know this coaster isn't for everyone, but personally, I fell in love with it, and I will always sing its praises.
Think it'll scare the kids?
The kids? This'll give the parents nightmares.
Alright, let's travel one last time and go back to Florida in the Universal Orlando Resort for Velocicoaster. This coaster is just completely perfect. From the instant you walk into the queue line, you are immersed into Jurassic World, with the several pre-shows, nods to the movies, and even the amazing Raptor animatronics. But who cares about all of that? We are here for the ride. Velocicoaster is such a well-rounded ride, featuring moments of strong positives, laterals, and airtime. My favorite thing about the coaster is that it really does just get better and better as you get deeper into the layout. The final element is also the best moment, and that is the Mosasaurus roll, which gives an insanely crazy moment of upside down ejector hang time, as well as strong laterals. This single element blew me away on my first ride, and it is still to this day my favorite element on any coaster ever. Outside of that, every other element on Velocicoaster is just amazing, and there really isn't a single foot of wasted track. I would say more, but I don't want to make this video any longer. However, this coaster is perfect and easily takes my number 1 spot. With that, we have finished this list. Before we wrap up, I want to break down the coasters both by state and manufacturer real quick. Starting by state. Leading the pack by a long shot is Florida with 7 coasters, which is not surprising since I've been to the most parks in the state. The second highest was Pennsylvania with 4, California with 3, Virginia with 3 as well. Then it was North Carolina with 2, Texas also with 2, and then Ohio slots in to round out the 2s. Finally, there's Georgia and Tennessee barely making the cut, both with only a single coaster. Lastly, this is the breakdown of manufacturers that made up my list. The leaders are Intamin and B&M, followed up by RMC. The bottom of the list is Aero, but that really isn't all that surprising. Well, with that, I'm finished with everything I've wanted to do. If you enjoyed the video, then please give it a like and subscribe. It would mean the absolute world to me. And also, please leave a comment with your top 10 coasters down below, because I would love to hear what your list is as well. Alright, thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next video, and I hope you all have a great day.